Welcome to Best Budz, the game where you grow pot, build your stash, and stop your opponents from doing the same. Add some fertilizer to your seeds, steal your opponent's biggest plant, or trade some hot wings for their pot. The first player with 15 pot points in their stash wins. To get started, you will need some counters, such as glass beads or coins, a dice, and a copy of Best Budz. The player whose birthday is closest to April 20th goes first, and that would be Shannon, whose birthday is in late February. She goes through the deck, gives each player a seed, and everyone puts a single growth counter on their seed. This is the start of their first plant, and as the game progresses, players will be growing more. Then Shannon shuffles the deck and deals 5 cards to each player, face down. Players can look at their cards. You always do 2 things at the beginning of your turn. Draw 2 cards and add a growth counter on each of your plants. Shannon takes 2 cards and adds a growth counter. She has a seed in her hand that she puts into play and adds a growth counter to it. Now she has 2 plants. She also has a watering can, which she uses to add another growth counter to her newest plant. All finished for now, Shannon announces she is done and Daryl starts his turn. He draws 2 cards and plants a seed, adding a growth counter to it. Deciding to wait for now, Daryl finishes his turn and play passes to Leanne. Drawing 2 cards, she adds 1 growth counter to her plant and plants a seed, adding a growth counter to it. Leanne has Gimme That, so she takes a card at random from each player and ends her turn. Jermaine has a lot of seeds. Fortunately, he also has the Gardener, which allows him to plant 2 seeds a turn. So first, he calls the Gardener by putting him face up in front of him on the table. Then Jermaine plants 2 seeds, adding a growth counter to each. With 3 plants growing, he is done. Back to Shannon, who adds 1 growth counter to each of her plants, draws 2 cards, and then thinking 3 plants is far too many, plays Police Raid on Jermaine. Police Raid forces a player to discard a plant at random. With 3 plants in play, Shannon grabs the dice and assigns 2 numbers to each plant. Rolling a 1, Jermaine has to discard the corresponding plant, returning the growth counters to the pile and discarding the seed. Shannon is done and play moves to Daryl. After a few turns, plants are getting bigger. You can harvest 1 plant during your turn. Daryl announces he wants to harvest a plant. Since anyone can play quick cards on any turn, Daryl needs to ask if anyone will do something to affect his harvest. No one does, so Daryl can harvest the plant. These 5 growth counters are the first in his stash. He'll need 15 to win. Play now moves to Leanne. Leanne draws 2 cards and adds a growth counter to her plant. With 8 growth counters, it is getting pretty big, and she announces she wants to harvest it. Jermaine plays a quick card, It's Gone, and takes control of 1 plant an opponent has, the plant Leanne was about to harvest. Because any player can use quick cards, your plants can be at risk during a harvest. With her biggest plant gone, Leanne decides not to harvest and play passes to Jermaine. He adds growth counters to each plant, draws 2 cards, and immediately announces he is going to harvest the plant he just stole from Leanne. Shannon has Cat Knocked It Over, which removes 3 growth counters from 1 plant. After discarding 3 growth counters, Jermaine puts the rest of the growth counters from the plant in his stash as pot points. Play continues until someone gets 15 pot points in their stash. Fast-paced and fun, Best Budz should take about 20 minutes per game.